Welcome back, friend. It's time to continue our book. We're reading from the complete Brambly Hedge collection by Jill Barklam. So now we're going to read the spring story. I guess I should have started with it, but oh well, we'll cover it now. So it was a beautiful morning. The spring sunshine crept into every cottage along Brambly Hedge, and the little windows in the trees were wide open. All the mice were up early, but earliest of all was Wilfred, who lived with his family in the hornbeam tree. It was Wilfred's birthday. Jumping out of bed, he ran into his parents' room and bouncing on their bed till they gave him his present. "Happy birthday, Wilfred," said Mr. and Mrs. Toadflax sleepily. He tore off the pretty wrappings and scattered them all over the floor. His squeaks of excitement woke his brothers and sisters, and his parents turned over to go to sleep again. Wilfred went and sat on the stairs and blew his new whistle. Look, there he is in his parents' room, all excited for his birthday with his new whistle. It looks like a slingshot and some other toys. Looks like fun stuff. Mr. and Mrs. Apple lived next door at Crabapple Cottage. The sound of Wilfred's whistle floated in through their bedroom window. Mrs. Apple got up and stretched. She sniffed the sweet air and went down to the kitchen to make a pot of elderflower tea. She was a very kindly mouse and a wonderful cook, and the cottage always smelled of newly made bread, fresh cakes, and blackberry puddings. Sounds good to me. Nothing beats the smell of fresh baking bread. Breakfast is ready, she called. Mr. Apple got out of bed with a sigh and joined her at the kitchen table. They ate their toast and jam and listened to Wilfred's warbling. "I think somebody needs a lesson from the blackbird," said Mr. Apple, brushing the crumbs from his whiskers and putting on his coat. Mrs. Apple was a nice, old-fashioned sort of mouse, and he was the warden of Stump's store, where all the food of Brambly Hedge was kept. So there's their little house, and it looks like there's a little storeroom and all the different levels of bedroom and kitchen. That looks like a mighty fine house. I would live in one. It looks pretty cool. Sounds good to me. And the Store Stump was not far away. As Mr. Apple walked happily through the grass to the big front doors, he felt someone pull his tail, and he turned around quickly. It was Wilfred, whistle in hand. "It's my birthday," he squeaked. "Is it, young mouse?" said Mr. Apple. "Well, happy birthday to you. Would you like to come and help me check the store stump? We'll see what we can find." So this must be the store stump, because it's definitely a stump, and I'm assuming it's the store. In the middle of the stump was an enormous hall, and leading off from it was many passages and staircases. They led in turn to dozens of storerooms full of nuts and honey and jams and pickles. Each one had to be inspected. Wilfred's legs felt tired by the time they had finished, and he sat by the fire in the hall to rest. Mr. Apple lifted down a jar of sugared violets. He made a sweet corner from a twist of paper and filled it with sweets. Taking Wilfred by the paw, he led him through the front dark corridors out into the sun. Wilfred went to look for his brother, and Mr. Apple hurried down to the hedge to visit his daughter Daisy and her husband, Lord Woodmouse. Yep, that looks like quite the storage of cupboard and a little fire to rest by. Looks like a nice place. Lord and Lady Woodmouse lived in the old oak palace in the middle of the hedge. From the outside, the palace looked like an ordinary oak tree, but inside the trunk was hollowed out to form a beautiful many-roomed mansion. At its heart was a grand ballroom. Polished doors led to magnificent kitchens, dining rooms, bedrooms, playrooms, spiral staircases, and secret passages. Old Oak Palace had always been the home of the Woodmouse family. Goodness, look at all the little nooks and crannies, all the little hidden passageways right out there in the big oak tree. It'd be interesting to explore. Upstairs in the best bedroom, Lord and Lady Woodmouse woke to bright sunshine. "What a perfect day," sighed Lady Daisy as she nibbled a primrose biscuit. When she heard that Daisy's father had come to call, they were soon up and dressed and running down the winding stairs to greet him. They found him in the kitchen, drinking mint tea with Mrs. Crusty Bread, the palace cook. Daisy gave Mr. Apple a kiss and sat down beside him. "Hello, Papa," she said. "What brings you here so early?" "I've just met little Wilfred. It's his birthday today. Shall we arrange a surprise picnic for him?" "What a wonderful idea," said Lord Woodmouse, and Daisy nodded. "I'll make him some special birthday cake if his mother agrees," said Mrs. Crusty Bread, hurrying off to the pantry to find the ingredients. So there they are in their bedroom with the morning sun coming in, getting ready to rise, and all around the table making plans for a surprise picnic. Everyone was invited, of course, so Mr. Apple set off to the hedge towards the woods and Lord Woodmouse went down towards the stream, calling at each house on the way. The first house on Mr. Apple's route was Elderberry Lodge. The fine elder bush was Basil's home. Basil was in charge of Store Stump cellars, and he was just getting up. A picnic, splendid. I'll bring some rose petal wine, he said, shuffling absent-mindedly around the room looking for his trousers. Basil had a long white whiskers and always wore a scarlet waistcoat. He used to keep the other mice amused for hours with his stories. Ah, there you are, rascals, he exclaimed, discovering his trousers behind the sofa. Mr. Apple came to the hornbeam. Mr. Toadflax was sitting on the front doorstep, eating bread and bramble jelly. We thought it would be nice to have a surprise picnic for you, or Wilfred, whispered Mr. Apple. We won't tell him that it's for what it's for, and we'll all meet at midday at the palace roots. Mr. Toadflax was delighted with the suggestion and went inside to tell his wife. Mr. Apple went on to visit Old Vole, who lived in this tussock of grass in the middle of the field. So there's Basil looking for his pants. And there's Mr. Toadflax. Or actually, that might be the vole, that they went to go visit Mr. Vole. Lord Woodmouse, meanwhile, was working his way down to the stream, and the news had traveled ahead of him along the hedge. Excited mice leaned out of their windows to ask when the picnic should take place. I'll see if I can find some preserves, said old Mrs. Eyebright. Shall we bring a tablecloth, called the weavers who lived in the tangly hawthorn trees? Poppy Eyebright from the dairy promised cheeses, and Dusty Dogwood, the miller, offered a batch of buns. There's everybody with daffodils shouting out, when's the picnic? And there's the weavers, and that looks like Dusty with his buns and cheese from Poppy. Mice soon began calling at the Store Stump to collect clover flower and honey, bramble brandy, and poppy seeds, and all the other good things needed for the picnic. Mrs. Crustybread baked a huge hazelnut cake with layers of thick cream, and Wilfred's mother decorated it. Mrs. Apple made some of her special primrose pudding. Wilfred knew that there was to be an outing, and that if he behaved, he would be allowed to go. He did his best, but with the new whistle, a drum, and a pea shooter for his birthday, it wasn't easy. Look at all the treats lined up to go, and there they are baking and making a beautiful cake. That must be the cake for Wilfred. When the Toadflax family finally arrived at the palace, Wilfred was rather disappointed that no one there seemed to know that it was his birthday. Indeed, he would rather hoped for a few more presents, but it would have been rude to drop hints, so he hid his feelings as best he could. At a signal from Lord Woodmouse, they all set up from their baskets, hampers, and wheelbarrows. There's everybody at the picnic. I haven't been on a picnic forever. That's something I would like to do this year. Everyone has something to carry. Wilfred was given an enormous basket so heavy he could barely lift it. Mr. Apple lent him a wheelbarrow, and his brothers and sisters helped him to push it, but still poor Wilfred found it hard to keep up. It was a very long way, weaving and pulling and wheedling and hauling, and the mice made their way around the palace, through the cornfield, up by the stream, and Wilfred felt very hot and wanted to rest. So there they are. There's Wilfred helping push, trying to get to the stream, and there's some more. Oh, looks like he, needed more help, because it looks like a lot of work. Here we are, cried Lord Woodmouse at last. The baskets were put down and open, and nettle stem cloths spread out on the mossy grass. In no time at all, the food was unpacked, and Wilfred was exhausted. He sat on his basket, too tired to open it, his whiskers drooping sadly. Mr. Apple with grace. For this good food from our green fields, may we be very grateful. Think the knives are in your basket, Wilfred, said Mrs. Apple kindly. If you get them out, we can cut the pies. Goodness, look at all the people at the picnic. Looks like quite the party. And a beautiful place. Slowly, Wilfred slipped from his perch and undid the latch, and when he lifted the lid, he could hardly believe his eyes. Inside the hamper, packed all around with presents, was an enormous cake. And on top, written in pink icing, was, "Happy birthday, Wilfred." "Happy birthday, dear Wilfred. Happy birthday to you," sang the mice. When Wilfred had opened all of his presents, Basil said, "Give us a tune." So he bashfully stood up and played Hickory Dickory Dandelion Clock on his new whistle, and Mrs. Toadflax nudged him meaningfully when he had finished. Thank you for all my lovely presents," said Wilfred, trying to avoid Mrs. Crustybread's eye. She had caught him firing acorns through her kitchen window earlier in the day. So there he is, looking in the hamper with all of his presents. So happy. "Now time for tea," announced Daisy Woodmouse. and the mice sat around the grouse, and Wilfred handed around the cake. And when tea was over, the grown-ups snoozed under the bluebells while the young mice played hide-and-seek in the primroses. Look at that spread with the cake and all the pies. And there they all are resting while the young mice play hide-and-seek. Looks like a fun time. At last the sun began to sink behind the far woods, and a chilly breeze blew over the field. It was time to go home. When the moon came up that night, Brambly Hedge was silent still, and every mouse was fast asleep. I bet that's Wilfred, so tired he couldn't even walk home. So there you go. That's it for the seasonal stories. Let's see what's coming next. Oh, the secret staircase. We will read some of that next time. Thank you. And if you enjoyed this, please subscribe or give me a thumbs up. And I hope to see you here next time, friend.